from the Aam Aadmi Party and 3 from the Bharatiya Janata Party. But Shelley Oberoi, in fact, went ahead after that and said that one vote was invalid. And after that, that particular statement by Shelley Oberoi became a flashpoint between the Bharatiya Janata Party and the Aam Aadmi Party. Apart from this, the bigger question remains for what this ruckus, who is liable? Chairs were broken, mics were broken, podium was broken. So it was actually a dent to the exchequer also, because it's the public money which is being used to run the MCD house. And if our elected councillors behave in such a manner, whose responsibility will be there to run a place like National Capital?
A shocking turn of events took place yesterday at the MCD Civic House. A massive brawl broke out between the BJP and AAP councillors after newly elected MCD Mayor Shelley Oberoi declared one vote invalid in the MCD Standing Committee elections and ordered a re-election. Soon after the mayor's order, the BJP councillors interrupted the counting, which eventually led to the full-blown brawl. The House later fell into chaos with councillors from both sides punching, kicking and slapping each other. Following this, BJP councillor Meenakshi Sharma filed a police complaint at the Kamla Market police station against AAP councillors. The complaint cited grievous harm and criminal assault on BJP women councillors.
Salvatore Babones has become quite a popular voice in India, especially amongst speaking tours, the academics, the intelligentsia. He's an associate professor at the University of Sydney, and he's out with a new article titled Unholy Alliance Inside the Activist Campaign to Pry India from the West. Salvatore Babones is joining us live and exclusively first here on CNN News 18. Salvatore, thanks a lot for coming in. And first, I want to begin by asking you, you've become quite a celebrity in India. How does that feel? You've been invited to, several events, speaking engagements. You've traveled a few cities now in India. How has your time been?
Look, it's been a pleasure, and the best part has been meeting people. Being on TV is a lot of fun, but the best part of it is that because you've been on television, then ordinary people recognize you, want to say hello, want to talk. And for me as a sociologist, it's been invaluable to have just that opportunity to meet people because they think they're familiar with me, they know me somehow, and it really has been wonderful.
There are a lot of people who, obviously like you, like what you say about India, the perspective that you bring on how India is being seen globally. But I think there are equal number of people who don't possibly like you that much because you're almost busting a narrative.
Well, if anyone doesn't like me, I haven't noticed because I've been received with really such open arms. But yes, I know, look, there must be people who resent being challenged with a narrative that they've monopolized for a long time. And I think Western knowledge of India has been monopolized by really just a half dozen people, columnists and intellectuals with access to Western media who've shaped the entire Western understanding of the country. And
that understanding is faulty, you would say?
I think it's not only faulty, it's largely false. That is, the quantitative data we have suggest a very different India from the qualitative understandings that we've received from this small group of journalists and intellectuals.
Before I get to your paper, Unholy Alliance Inside the Activist Campaign to Pry India from the West, I just want to take that point further. Do you believe that false analysis, the qualitative analysis in the hands of a few, half a dozen people and columnists overseas, is that a recent trend or has that existed? Because a lot of people believe that's predominantly anti-Modi activism.
I think it is mostly anti-Modi activism, but it's anti-Modi activism that has been translated into anti-India or anti-democracy narratives. That is, instead of challenging the government, they're challenging the state. We see that, for example, in challenging the independence of the Electoral Commission of India. Now, I've seen very little in India that suggests that the Electoral Commission has been compromised in any way. Yet the international narrative we've heard is the Electoral Commission has gone from being fully independent just 8 or 10 years ago to now being in the pocket of the government today. Now, I doubt that narrative is true, but that's what we hear. People are taking their personal subjective opinions and presenting it as objective fact.
Can I just ask you, you're coming to India, you've been in India at a time when George Soros's comments have been in the news. I'm sure you're aware of what he has said, not for the first time. But do you believe his comments, as they're being received, truly do blow the whistle on exactly what we've been talking about, that there is this group of individuals, including Indians, who are shaping
almost
this
exclusively
almost
Indians.
exclusively
Yeah, yeah.
Indians, you believe, who are shaping this narrative, because many believe that George Soros doesn't even know much about India. What he's saying and what he believes about India and very little democracy in India is actually a narrative fed to him.
Look, I doubt George Soros knows much about Indian democracy, but he does know what he reads in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal, which is then presented as factual accounts of Indian democracy. Yet those accounts are coming, again, I keep stressing this, from a very small number of primarily South Asian, primarily Indian voices who have very strongly held opinions on India. Now, I don't doubt the sincerity of those opinions that are being reported in these newspapers, but they come to be presented as fact to the rest of the world. And because we have no other source of information on India, we take it seriously. I mean, when you hear someone call American democracy now being a fascist dictatorship, you know, the Republicans are fascists, the Democrats are fascists, you shrug your shoulders because you're very familiar with American democracy. You can make your own decisions. When a Westerner sees India called fascist in the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post or the New York Times, we take that seriously because we know very little about India. We have very little depth of knowledge. Most Americans couldn't name a single Indian leader, not even Narendra Modi. Those who could name Narendra Modi couldn't name a second one. Now, I challenge your viewers, almost every one of them could not only name Joe Biden, but could name the last 3 presidents of the United States and could probably name at least 2 or 3 governors and cabinet secretaries in the United States. Your knowledge of America is so deep. It's so deep that you're not swayed by these sorts of ridiculous statements about American democracy. But our knowledge of India is so shallow that if all we hear are these complaints, we take them seriously.
George Soros believes that there's a Hindu nationalist government under Narendra Modi in India, and he has in the past expressed his view that, he wants this government out. I want to understand from you, and I think there are shades of this in your new paper, in your new article, that Hindu nationalism has been almost equated with fascism, with Nazism. Hindutva today is equated with Nazism. And there's very little proof to show that they're actually alike. Why do you think that is happening, and where is this coming from? Why are Hindu nationalists treated with such suspicion?
There's nothing in common between Hindutva and Nazism, and I think you can see that when you see what else is also compared to Nazism. We routinely see Zionism, that is Jews' desire to return to Israel, as a form of Nazism or fascism. And that, of course, is absolutely ridiculous. The Nazi regime was as anti-Semitic, committed an anti-Semitic genocide. We see these terms thrown around because they're very emotional terms, and people want to associate things they disagree with in these emotional connections to absolute evil. Of course, this is pure rhetoric. But again, I stress to an American who knows nothing about India, this pure rhetoric becomes all that person knows about India, and that's why this is causing such problems. Now, let's be honest, the current government of India is strongly, deeply nationalistic, just as every government in the United States is deeply nationalistic, just as every major political party in India is nationalistic, and the current party is closely associated with Hinduism, just as every major political party in India is closely associated with Hinduism. So there's nothing, you can call it Hindu nationalist. I prefer not to put that label on it, but is it a is it a government that's Hindu in orientation? Yes. Is it a government that's nationalist in orientation? Yes. But I stress to Indians who may oppose the current government that someday if Congress comes back to power, Congress will be a Hindu-oriented government that will be highly nationalist. And if Indians accept this vilification of Hinduism and nationalism, they'll find this vilification sticks even when the BJP is gone.
Interestingly, what you also say in your paper is that there is a form of, as you said, anti-Zionism, anti-Hinduism that is being masked as anti-Hindutva activism. Because Hindutva is bad, we are not opposing Hinduism, we are opposing Hindutva. That's an argument we've heard from academics all around. In fact, there are organizations, academic organizations and groups in the US that hold seminars like Dismantle Global Hindutva. And the front is that this is against Hindutva. This is not against Hindus and Hinduism per se. Do you believe that is the truth?
Yeah, we've seen this playbook before. So in Western academia, there's a very strong strain of anti-Semitism. But after World War II, you couldn't be publicly anti-Semitic. So instead, this was translated into anti-Zionism. It's the same people, the same organizations, the same departments of the same universities that used to be openly anti-Semitic. They're now anti-Zionist. Well, now we're seeing those same elite institutions becoming anti-Hindutva. They can't be openly anti-Hindu, but they can be anti-Hindutva. And I think that anti-Hindutva message is simply the polite face of anti-Hinduism. And it's the same playbook as with anti-Zionism. Because you can't tell which anti-Zionists are really anti-Semites, you can say I'm anti-Zionist and get away with it. Because you can't tell which anti-Hindutva activists are really just anti-Hindu, you can say it and get away with it. But I think when you look at it, and you look at the people who are so vehemently anti-Hindutva, and you ask, why are you elite white American professor who has, or elite white British intellectual who have no connection with India, why are you so viscerally anti-Hindutva? And I can only trace it to the historical anti-Hinduism, which we know was historically present. All you have to do is look at the way Winston Churchill talked about Mahatma Gandhi to see this anti-Hinduism, this anti-Hindu bias among the elite upper crust in America and the United Kingdom. Well, they can't say they're anti-Hindu anymore, so they found a new way to say it.
Do you believe that the world globally is beginning to look at this in the manner that you see it, or there is a lobby that is, very deeply protecting this form of new anti-Hinduism?
There are, of course, Hindu civil society organizations in the U.S. The Coalition of Hindus in North America and the Hindu American Foundation. They're trying to fight these efforts, but I think that they're up against a very strong opponent. Dr. Rajiv Malhotra has written quite a bit about this. They're up against an intellectual establishment that has been viscerally anti-Hindu since the days of colonialism, that is well entrenched, that has access to the top institutions, the top newspapers, the top magazines and journals in American and British society. And it's very difficult to fight this trend in the academy when they have control of the institutions. I mean, I've heard people in India say that, the establishment, the famous phrase, they're in government, we control the establishment. I don't know how true that really is in India, but it's very much true of the United States and United Kingdom.
No, I think people believe it's pretty much true in India. I mean, the global fight, which is the academia fight, is still very much true in India too, isn't it? That's what controls the narrative still today, and that's also what controls the history, for example. History is a huge battle.
I don't know how true it is, but the Oxbridge and Ivy League elite very much control the establishment in the United States and UK.
In your article, you contend that Christian missionary and Islamist pressures are working behind the scenes in some of these reports we see over India, some of these rankings that routinely seem to be very terrible on India and term India as anti-Muslim or anti-religious freedom or religious expression. Explain that. Why do you believe that there is a nexus behind these rankings?
Well, so first let me contextualize it. Genocide Watch, international NGO, rates India one of the 10 most likely countries to experience a genocide in the 2020s. Wow. They claim that there is a 8% chance that there will be a genocide in India in 2023. Now look around you in India. Is there likely to be a genocide? I don't think so.
I really don't think so.
But this narrative has been built and built and built. And a lot of it has to do with these international religious freedom reports produced by the U.S. State Department and particularly by the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, USCIRF, which puts together these reports on international religious freedom. Now, the reports compiled by the State Department on India focused almost entirely on complaints made by Christian missionaries. Because if you think about it, if a Muslim in India feels she's facing discrimination, is she likely to go to the U.S. State Department to complain? It's likely not. Okay. So of the hundreds of complaints made to the U.S. State Department about repression of religious freedom in India, fewer than 10, single-digit numbers, have to do with Muslims. 800 or more have to do with Christians.
Okay. And Christian missionaries.
It's all missionary related. However, when the Pew Research Center did its International Religious Freedom rankings based on these reports, first, it rated India the worst country in the world. I'm emphasizing that. Worst in the world for social hostility to religion, meaning that people face more communal violence, more religious hostility in India than in Myanmar, which just had a genocide. I mean, the Rohingya were driven out of Myanmar. They're claiming the situation in India is worse than in Myanmar. That's all based on these U.S. State Department reports where all of the complaints are made by missionaries. Yet in their text narrative of their report, they only mention complaints
against Muslims.
Against Muslims.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're taking a raw data that says Christians are facing repression in India. They're then writing a report that says India is the worst in the world for religious repression, and it's repression against Muslims. And then that narrative gets taken up. So all of the reports based on this Pew Research Center ranking says Muslims face increasing repression in India. Just look, India's been named worst in the world for repression. Now, we know quantitatively, there's been very good research on this, that anti-Christian violence in India is extremely rare. Okay, and the leading researcher, quantitative researcher of this, has said that it's rarer than anti-Semitism in the United States. Okay, so it exists.
Despite India's vast population difference.
Well, in terms of per capita. Okay. So it exists in India, but it's very rare. So there are churches that have had vandalism on their church doors. We're not denying that. But it's rarer than synagogues in America facing, synagogues in America have been subject every 5 or 10 years to gun attacks. I mean, there's been very serious violence against Jews in the United States. Okay, so we have this situation where we know that violence against Christians is very low in India, yet it's been reported as if it's massive because Christian missionaries in India use the State Department to complain. And then these Christian complaints are used by Islamist organizations and intellectuals who are sympathetic to the Islamist agenda to make it out as if there's going to be a Muslim genocide in India. Thus the strange bedfellows or unholy alliance aspect of the report.
The AIMIM lashed out at the centre over the renaming of the two Maharashtra cities. They've promised a massive show of strength in the form of a morcha, saying that Aurangabad was and will always be their city. The AIMIM also said that Aurangabadis will defeat forces who are playing politics.
हमने हमेशा से ही इस तरह की जो सरकार की कोशिशें रह रही है कि किसी सड़क का नाम बदल दो, किसी बगीचे का नाम बदल दो, किसी रेलवे स्टेशन का, एयरपोर्ट का नाम बदल दो, शहरों के नाम बदल दो, लेकिन मुद्दों का हमने पहले से ही विरोध किया है और इसलिए किया है कि इतिहास अच्छा हो सकता है, इतिहास बुरा हो सकता है। आप इतिहास के पन्नों को किताबों से फाड़ सकते हैं, आप अपने बोर्ड को वहां से हटाकर अपना बोर्ड लगा सकते हैं, लेकिन इतिहास इतिहास है।
Amid YSRTP chief YS Sharmila meeting Telangana Governor Tamilisai Soundararajan after several attacks by the ruling BRS against her, YS Sharmila, after meeting the governor, said that there are no leaders, ministers, CM and workers in BRS. She further added that the whole of BRS can be called BRS goons. Days after Supreme Court verdict delivered a massive win for former Tamil Nadu Chief Minister Edappadi Palaniswamy, CNN News 18 spoke exclusively to the ousted AIADMK leader VK Sasikala. She urged the two AIADMK factions to unite ahead of the 2024 elections and said that OPS shouldn't see the verdict as a setback. Remember, the Supreme Court upheld the Madras High Court's order which stated that EPS is the sole convener of the AIADMK.
பிஜேபி எல்லாரும் சேர்ந்து இணைந்து வேலை பண்ணணும்னு நினைக்கிறாங்க. நீங்க அத பத்தி உங்க கருத்து மேம்?
என்னை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் எங்களுடைய கட்சியை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் ஒன்றா இணைஞ்சு வரும் நாடாளுமன்ற தேர்தலில் மகத்தான வெற்றி பெறணும் அப்படிங்கிறது தான் என்னோட.
At least 7 people were killed in a road accident that took place in Bhubaneswar near the Nilapur railway overbridge. 6 died on the spot, while 1 person died on the way to the hospital. A mini truck crashed into a stationary truck. A police probe is currently underway. All of the victims were from Bengal. Actor Anupam Kher attended the Global Kashmiri Pandit Conclave in the national capital today and spoke at length about the ordeals of Kashmiri Pandits and how his film The Kashmir Files highlighted them. He urged the audience to volunteer in monetarily supporting charities for Kashmiri Pandits and announced an amount of 5 lakh rupees himself. Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated the Barisu Kannada Dim Dimava cultural festival at the Talkatpura Stadium in the national capital. Remember, Barusu Kannada Dimdimava Cultural Festival is being organized to celebrate Karnataka's culture, traditions and history. It also marks the Delhi Karnataka Association's 75th anniversary. It is in line with the Prime Minister's vision of Ek Bharat, Shresth Bharat. PM Narendra Modi earlier in the day, along with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, had wide-ranging talks with a focus on boosting bilateral ties in the areas of clean energy, trade and new technology. Talks took place hours after Chancellor Scholz arrived in the national capital on a two-day visit to India, his first to the country after he became the German Chancellor in 2021.
Digital transformation, fintech, IT, telecom और सप्लाई चेन्स के डाइवर्सिफिकेशन जैसे विषयों पर हमें दोनों देशों के प्रमुख इंडस्ट्री लीडर्स के उपयोगी विचार और सुझाव भी सुनने को मिले। भारत और जर्मनी ट्रायंगुलर डेवलपमेंट कॉरपोरेशन के तहत तीसरे देशों के विकास के लिए आपसी सहयोग बढ़ा रहे हैं।
It is important for us to use these opportunities to address the challenges ahead of us and to make sure that in a whole host of areas, economic, cultural and others.
You also say that organizations like the Pew Research is not technically anti-India. They don't have any bias against India. They don't have any bias against Hindus, for example, but their methodology is so bad. One is picking up these reports from US State Departments, which obviously have a tone which is more Christian missionary complaints. I don't know why they still base their reports on this. It's so obvious that this is not going to be good data for them. The other is also the way you give points, for example. If Christian missionaries in India face any violence, there is a reason for that, but they will not rate it in the same manner as they would rate, for example, any actual communal crime. You know, the fact that they look at an attack on a Christian missionary in the same way as they would look at any other violence, don't you think even that is problematic? The whole methodology is problematic.
Look, there are small problems with methodology, but I don't want to focus on those technical. There are technical problems with the methodology. But we don't have to rely on these primarily qualitative rankings based on reports of journalists and NGOs because we have hard survey data about religious freedom in India. Ironically, it comes from the same Pew Research Center, but from a different group at the Pew Research Center. And this hard survey data shows us that violence or discrimination against Muslims and Christians in India reported by actual Muslims and Christians in India is very rare. The Pew Research Center did an extraordinarily high-quality survey in 2019-2020 of 29,999 households in India. I think they wish they'd gotten just one more, 29,999. Top quality survey, more than an 85% response rate, which in survey research is unheard of. You have to really try hard to get an 85% response rate. This wasn't a telephone or a internet survey. This was knocking on doors, personally talking to people in 17 different languages, all across India. They found that 89% of Christians and 89% of Muslims say they are, quote unquote, very free to practice their religion in India. Only 2% of each group say they are unfree. Okay, so only a tiny minority of Christians and Muslims have any complaint about their ability to freely practice religion in India. So we have the hard survey data. We don't have to rely on these anecdotal reports. We can go to the numbers.
And yet the same Pew Research group doesn't look at its own data. It looks at these reports by the US State Department.
Because I think there are different motivations of different groups within Pew. Now, my instinct is, I can't know this, my instinct is that Pew actually commissioned this major quantitative study to back up its qualitative reports.
But it didn't happen.
But it didn't happen. So the Sir John Templeton Foundation, which is the foundation that funds Pew's international religious freedom efforts, they're closely linked to Christian missionary groups. And so they have a particular interest in defending missionaries abroad. That's not explicitly what they do, but they fund a lot of work that is pro-missionary, supportive of missionaries.
You know, recently there have been hashtags about a genocide in India, for example, that India is so anti-Muslim that there's so much widespread violence against Muslims that they can't literally live in India
Everyone thinks that India's Muslims are on the verge of a genocide, except India's Muslims.
Yeah, exactly.
India's Muslims, when asked what are the top problems you face today, number one is unemployment.
Exactly.
Number two is crime. Number three is corruption. Intercommunal violence is number four. Okay, so India's own Muslims do not rate intercommunal tension
as their number one problem. Fundamentally, the point is that a few activists, academics are creating a narrative about India that average people, Hindus, Muslims, Christians alike in India, do not subscribe to. They are not the ones who are building this narrative. It's a handful of people.
And I always want to emphasize this with the work I've been doing on India and with my speaking to the Indian press and to Indian people. In all of this, Indian Muslims are not to blame for this narrative.
Exactly.
This is not a narrative that is coming from ordinary Indian Muslims. It may come from some Muslim politicians or Muslim leaders in India. It may come from a lot of Hindu politicians and Hindu leaders in India. It is not coming from ordinary Muslims in India. Ordinary Muslims in India, from all the data we have, are very happy to be Indian, respect Hindus, that is, they say, again, more than 90% of Indians of every major religion, according to the Pew Research, more than 90% of Indians of every major religion agree with the statement that respecting other people's religions is fundamental to what it means to be Indian.
Exactly.
India's Muslims respect India's Hindus, and India's Hindus respect India's Muslims. And whatever we see on Twitter, whatever we see in these reports, is all the narrative of a small number of cranky people. I'm serious. This is not what we see in the data when we talk to real people.
Finally, Salvatore Babones, let me ask you, you've spent some time in India, you're researching Indian democracy. What would you like to leave our viewers with? What is your take on Indian democracy, especially in such a vitiated atmosphere today, at least in the media or in terms of academia, which loves to bash Indian democracy? For them, a lot of Indian democracy actually doesn't exist. We are some sort of an autocracy, elected autocracy. What is your take on Indian democracy?
Look, all the quantitative and all the objective evidence indicates that Indian democracy is exceptionally, I use the word extraordinarily well institutionalized for a country of India's level of GDP. Now, we can debate whether Indian democracy is as well institutionalized as North American or Western European democracy. We can discuss that. But for developing countries, India is the only developing country with a GDP per capita of less than about $10,000 per year that has a well-institutionalized democracy with 3 or 4 decades history of regular elections with transfer of power. Now, if people feel that the BJP is somehow undermining democracy, I tell them, no, the BJP has been modernizing Indian democracy. And this is the story that comes out of all the books about the 2019 election. What the BJP has done is it's become India's first modern political party, in the sense that they're using the same kinds of information technology and electoral tools that are routinely used by the U.S. Democrats, the U.S. Republicans, Labour and Conservatives in the U.K. The most important thing for Indian democracy today is that other opposition parties in India, particularly the Congress, but also the AAP, any other opposition parties, that they modernize as well. They won't be able to compete with the BJP and make India a truly competitive democracy again unless they adopt the same kinds of modern tools that the BJP has.
All right, I leave it on that note. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you.
To the ousted AIADMK leader VK Sasikala, she urged the two AIADMK factions to unite ahead of the 2024 elections and said that OPS shouldn't see the verdict as a setback. Remember, the Supreme Court upheld the Madras High Court's order, which stated that EPS is the sole convener of the AIADMK.
பிஜேபி எல்லாரும் சேர்ந்து இணைந்து வேலை பண்ணணும்னு நினைக்கிறாங்க. நீங்க அதை பத்தி உங்க கருத்து மேம்?
என்னை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும், எங்களுடைய கட்சியை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் ஒன்றா இணைஞ்சு வரும் நாடாளுமன்ற தேர்தலில் மகத்தான வெற்றி பெறணும் அப்படிங்கிறது தான் என்னோட.
At least 7 people were killed in a road accident that took place in Bhubaneswar near the Nilapur railway overbridge. 6 died on the spot, while 1 person died on the way to the hospital. A mini truck crashed into a stationary truck. A police probe is currently underway. All of the victims were from Bengal. Actor Anupam Kher attended the Global Kashmiri Pandit Conclave in the national capital today and spoke at length about the ordeals of Kashmiri Pandits and how his film, The Kashmir Files, highlighted them. He urged the audience to volunteer in monetarily supporting charities for Kashmiri Pandits and announced an amount of 5 lakh rupees himself. Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated the Barisu Kannada Dim Dimava Cultural Festival at the Talkatpura Stadium in the national capital. Remember, Barisu Kannada Dim Dimava Cultural Festival is being organized to celebrate Karnataka's culture, traditions and history. It also marks the Delhi Karnataka Association's 75th anniversary. It is in line with the Prime Minister's vision of Ek Bharat, Shresth Bharat. PM Narendra Modi earlier in the day, along with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, had wide-ranging talks with a focus on boosting bilateral ties in the areas of clean energy, trade and new technology. Talks took place hours after Chancellor Scholz arrived in the national capital on a two-day visit to India, his first to the country after he became the German Chancellor in 2021.
डिजिटल ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन, फिनटेक, आईटी, टेलीकॉम और सप्लाई चेन्स के डाइवर्सिफिकेशन जैसे विषयों पर हमें दोनों देशों के प्रमुख इंडस्ट्री लीडर्स के उपयोगी विचार और सुझाव भी सुनने को मिले। भारत और जर्मनी ट्रायंगुलर डेवलपमेंट कॉरपोरेशन के तहत तीसरे देशों के विकास के लिए आपस
Namaste, you're on News Blitz 50. I'm Anand Narasimhan. Let's get a quick check of the day's top news. Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated the Barisu Kannada Dim Dimava Cultural Festival at the Talkatpura Stadium in the national capital. Remember, Barisu Kannada Dim Dimava Cultural Festival is being organized to celebrate Karnataka's culture, traditions and history. It also marks the Delhi Karnataka Association's 75th anniversary. It is in line with the Prime Minister's vision of Ek Bharat, Shresth Bharat. PM Narendra Modi earlier in the day, along with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, had wide-ranging talks with a focus on boosting bilateral ties in the areas of clean energy, trade and new technology. Talks took place hours after Chancellor Scholz arrived in the national capital on a two-day visit to India, his first to the country after he became the German Chancellor in 2021.
डिजिटल ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन, फिनटेक, आईटी, टेलीकॉम और सप्लाई चेन्स के डाइवर्सिफिकेशन जैसे विषयों पर हमें दोनों देशों के प्रमुख इंडस्ट्री लीडर्स के उपयोगी विचार और सुझाव भी सुनने को मिले। भारत और जर्मनी ट्रायंगुलर डेवलपमेंट कॉरपोरेशन के तहत तीसरे देशों के विकास के लिए आपसी सहयोग बढ़ा रहा है।
It is important for us to use these opportunities to address the challenges ahead of us and to make sure that in a whole host of areas, economic, cultural and others, we further deepen and expand our relationship. We have to make sure that countries in Asia, Africa and America are not too strongly and negatively impacted by the terrible war of aggression that Russia started against Ukraine. Supply shortages is thus one priority of our work.
Union Home Minister Amit Shah lashed out at Bihar Chief Minister Nitish Kumar, who has just announced a few days ago that he wants to be the opposition's prime ministerial face. Amit Shah stated that Nitish was made Chief Minister as promised, but he still dreams of becoming PM every 3 years. Shah also went on to say that Nitish Kumar has surrendered himself to Lalu Prasad and Sonia Gandhi, emphasizing that his door to the BJP is forever closed.
नीतीश बाबू, आप प्रधानमंत्री बनने के लिए विकासवादी से अवसरवादी बने, कांग्रेस और आरजेडी के शरण में गए और नीतीश बाबू की प्रधानमंत्री बनने की महत्वाकांक्षा ने बिहार का बंटा धार कर दिया।
Bihar Chief Minister Nitish Kumar hitting back at the Union Home Minister Amit Shah. Nitish Kumar asked the Home Minister if he has done anything for Bihar. He further added that BJP promised to help Bihar but haven't done anything in the last 8 years.
अब आप भी जरा बताइए क्या अनुभव है इन लोगों का। 2021 में पहली बार ये राजनीति में राज्य मंत्री बने, कितना दिन का अनुभव है? क्या देश की आजादी को आप जानते हैं और अपने पार्टी के नेताओं को भी नहीं जानते हैं।
Former Congress President Sonia Gandhi has hinted towards retirement from politics while addressing the workers in Raipur. Sonia Gandhi said that her innings could end only with the Bharat Jodo Yatra. Sonia said that the Yatra is a turning point and it has proved that people of India want harmony, tolerance and equality.
What gratifies me most is that my innings could conclude with the Bharat Jodo Yatra. The Yatra has come as a turning point. It has proved that the people of India overwhelmingly want harmony, tolerance and equality.
Over 2 days after pro-Khalistan Sikh leader Amritpal Singh Sandhu threatened Punjab police and instigated violence in Anjanala, the Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann has slammed Amritpal. Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann said in a tweet that, and I quote, "Those who carry the Guru Granth Sahib with a shield to police stations cannot be called heirs of Punjab and Punjabiyat from any side," unquote. MOS Home and Youth Affairs and Sports Nishit Pramanik's convoy was attacked in Cooch Bihar's Dinhata area while he was going to meet party workers. The window panes of the cars were vandalized. BJP alleges that the attack was carried out by Trinamool Congress-backed goons.
बंगाल का जो राजनीतिक सिचुएशन है, यहाँ पर डेमोक्रेसी पूरी तरह से कोलैप्स हो चुका है। आप देख रहे हैं किस तरह दुष्कृतिकारियों को लेकर टीएमसी राजनीति कर रही है। यहाँ पर नेता मंत्री सुरक्षित नहीं है तो आम आदमी का क्या हाल हो सकता है, एक बार आप देख लीजिए। आज मैं कहूँगा कि तृणमूल कांग्रेस का इस जो बिहेवियर है इसको मैं धिक्कार करूँगा और पुलिस का जो यहाँ पर जो रोल है, आप देखिए जो लोग बॉम्ब मार रहा है, जो लोग पत्थरबाजी कर रहा है, उनको सेव कर रहा है, पुलिस उनको प्रोटेक्ट कर रहा है। तो बंगाल का जो डेमोक्रेसी है मैं कहूँगा पूरी तरह से कोलैप्स हो चुका है। यहाँ पर जो रूल ऑफ लॉ है पूरी तरह से यहाँ पर कोलैप्स हो चुका है।
With just a few days to go for the E-Road bypass, Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin conducted the last leg of campaigning today. Remember, he's campaigning for DMK's front candidate and senior Congress leader EVKS Ilangovan. The bypass takes place on the 27th, with results stated to be counted on the 2nd of March. Remember, the seat in Tamil Nadu was vacated after the death of the incumbent MLA E. Thirumagan. 3 security personnel, including an assistant sub-inspector, were martyred in an encounter with the Maos in Sukma district of Chhattisgarh today. Based on precise input about the presence of Naxals, security forces launched an operation and came under ambush. However, the ultras have also suffered major damage in the encounter. Several illegal buildings in the Chawla market of Uttar Pradesh's Kanpur were razed down by Development Authority today. The action was taken after a recent High Court order which pronounced its action on the illegal structures in Kanpur. Large number of security forces were also deployed in the market area for smooth operations.
5 दुकानें हैं, अब इनका अवैध रूप से निर्माण हुआ था। माननीय उच्च न्यायालय के निर्देश के क्रम में उपाध्यक्ष महोदय के निर्देश के अनुसार हम लोग उसको ध्वस्त करा रहे हैं। आज फिलहाल ये 5 दुकानें ही ध्वस्त कराई जाएंगी।
A unique examination hall has been set up in Lucknow Model Jail for inmates across several ages appearing for Uttar Pradesh's board exams. This year, about 24 prisoners are writing board exams and the government has provided the inmates with books. Head jailer Ravindranath stressed on the importance of education for the inmates. 2 cities in Maharashtra have been renamed. Aurangabad will now be known as Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar and Usmanabad will now be called Dharashiv. The change was approved by the Ministry of Home Affairs on Friday, which is when Maharashtra Chief Minister Eknath Shinde also confirmed the change. The AIMIM lashed out at the centre over the renaming of the 2 Maharashtra cities. They promised a massive show of strength in the form of a morcha, saying that Aurangabad was and will always be their city. The AIMIM also said that Aurangabadis will defeat forces who are playing politics.
हमने हमेशा से ही इस तरह की जो सरकार की कोशिशें रह रही है कि किसी सड़क का नाम बदल दो, किसी बगीचे का नाम बदल दो, किसी रेलवे स्टेशन का, एयरपोर्ट का नाम बदल दो, शहरों के नाम बदल दो, लेकिन मुद्दों का हमने पहले से ही विरोध किया और इसलिए किया है कि इतिहास अच्छा हो सकता है, इतिहास बुरा हो सकता है। आप इतिहास के पन्नों को किताबों से फाड़ सकते हैं, आप अपने बोर्ड को वहाँ से हटाकर अपना बोर्ड लगा सकते हैं, लेकिन इतिहास है।
Amid YSRTP chief YS Sharmila meeting Telangana Governor Tamilisai Soundararajan after several attacks by the ruling BRS against her, YS Sharmila, after meeting the governor, said that there are no leaders, ministers, CM and workers in BRS. She further added that the whole of BRS can be called BRS goons. Days after Supreme Court verdict delivered a massive win for former Tamil Nadu Chief Minister Edapadi Palaniaswamy, CNN News 18 spoke exclusively to the ousted AIADMK leader VK Sasikala. She urged the two AIADMK factions to unite ahead of the 2024 elections and said that OPS shouldn't see the verdict as a setback. Remember, the Supreme Court upheld the Madras High Court's order which stated that EPS is the sole convener of the AIADMK.
பிஜேபி எல்லாரும் சேர்ந்து இணைந்து வேலை பண்ணணும்னு நினைக்கிறாங்க. நீங்க அதை பத்தி உங்க கருத்து மேம்?
என்னை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் எங்களுடைய கட்சியை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் ஒன்றா இணைஞ்சு வரும் நாடாளுமன்ற தேர்தலில் மகத்தான வெற்றி பெறணும் அப்படிங்கிறது தான் என்னுடைய.
At least 7 people were killed in a road accident that took place in Bhubaneswar near the Nilapur railway overbridge. 6 died on the spot, while 1 person died on the way to the hospital. A mini truck crashed into a stationary truck. A police probe is currently underway. All of the victims were from Bengal. Actor Anupam Kher attended the Global Kashmiri Pandit Conclave in the national capital today and spoke at length about the ordeals of Kashmiri Pandits and how his film The Kashmir Files highlighted them. He urged the audience to volunteer in monetarily supporting charities for Kashmiri Pandits and announced an amount of 5 lakh rupees himself. CRPF personnel saved the life of a man by providing timely CPR and medicines. This man had suffered cardiac arrest on the national highway in Jammu and Kashmir. He was later sent to hospital with co-passengers of the vehicle he was travelling in. An Indian Air Force contingent will participate in the multilateral exercise Desert Flag in the UAE. 5 LCA Tejas fighter jets along with the 2 C-17 transport aircraft are taking part from India in this exercise. This is the first time ever that the IAF, or the Indian Air Force, has deployed the Made in India light combat aircraft Tejas fighter for an exercise outside the country. In a first-of-its-kind act, the son of an army jawan who went missing after India-Pakistan war in 1965 and was lodged in Lahore prison has now urged the central government to intervene and ensure the release of his father, Anand Patri. The sepoy's son is now 65 years old and has written to both President Murmu and PM Modi to at least try and get his father's death certificate from Pakistan. In a bid to spread awareness about stray dog sterilization, volunteers of PETA India staged a demonstration in several cities in Bhubaneswar. The organization stressed on sterilization for dogs and cats and urged people to adopt animals instead of buying them. Ahead of the World Spay Day on 28th of February, PETA has launched its campaign named Animal Birth Control.
As of now, the municipality of any city is required to run a sterilization program. The law says that for 22 years they've been required to run this program. PETA also has our own sterilization drives. We have one in Bombay. We have, otherwise also the animals we do pick up for sterilization and otherwise, and we do a lot of outreach to let people know that it's important to get this done.
Movies now, and Pathan's dream run continues at the box office. Shah Rukh Khan, Deepika Padukone starrer film has now crossed over 1,000 crore globally. Pathan reached the 1,000 crore mark on date 27 and became the 5th Indian film to do so. The film's unprecedented success comes at a time when the Hindi film industry has gone through a lull over the last 2 years. From one blockbuster to another, RRR has made the nation proud again. The S.S. Rajamouli directed movie has won in 5 categories at the recently held Hollywood Critics Association Awards. The film was awarded in several categories including Best International Film, Best Action, Best Stunts and Best Song. S.S. Rajamouli thanked his entire team for the win and dedicated the win to the multiple Indian filmmakers. On to a CNN News 18 exclusive. While Pakistan continues to face multiple crises, Pak Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has stated that no one is helping Pakistan. He also said that Pakistan is getting isolated on the global stage. Then Shehbaz Sharif asked its Apex committee to put its own house in order. Otherwise, no one would come and help Pakistan out of its crisis.
मन की बस की बात नहीं, इंसान तो कोशिश कर सकता है इखलास के साथ, तो वो कोशिशें अल्लाह ताला उसमें बरकत डाल रहा है। लेकिन अगर हम अपने घर के हालात खुद दुरुस्त नहीं करेंगे तो फिर कोई हमारी मदद को नहीं आएगा। तो इसलिए मैं समझता हूँ कि जो पॉलिटिकल स्टेबिलिटी वो हर लिहाज से मुकद्दम है।
Amidst worsening tensions between Beijing and Washington, United States and China are playing a game of cat and mouse over the South China Sea. Here's a report.
We're getting a close-up look at a Chinese fighter jet. The aircrew here identifies it as a J-11, a two-seater that they say is armed with air-to-air missiles. And it's been shadowing this U.S. Navy plane now for about 15 minutes. It is pretty remarkable to see this Chinese warplane operating at such close proximity, just several hundred feet away from our aircraft. We're flying at a low altitude, 1,000 feet, a little more than 300 meters above sea level, east of Taiwan, looking for a Chinese warship currently believed to be operating in these stormy waters.
The plane spots a Chinese guided missile destroyer.
I'm a United States military aircraft and I will remain a safety tribute unit.
A cat and mouse game between two rival militaries in one of the most hotly contested regions in the world.